On October 2015, Professor Angus Deaton was awarded the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Science by the Royal Swedish Academy of Science. Deaton was born in Scotland and now he is a professor in Economic and International Affairs in Princeton University. He was awarded for his contribution in consumption, poverty, and welfare that influenced the theory in macroeconomics.
I feel passionately about measurement, about how difficult it is, about how much theory and conceptualization is involved in measurement, and indeed how much politics is involved in measurement. And that to me is the center of what I do, trying to be careful and honest about measurement.
Deaton's career has focused on understanding how people consume goods and services. It's a crucial step to achieving social goals like improved health and well-being, and also poverty and inequality reduction. Unlike many economists who focus on large-scale trends, he aims to understand why each person makes the choice they do. He said that for designing economic policy that promotes welfare and reduces poverty, we must first understand individual consumption choice. This economic professor from Princeton University changed the paradigm to consumption on increasing economic growth theory rather than to production and income. In his view, consumption has a central role in economic growth in calculating degree of recession, poverty, and wealth. His research tried to solve three major questions: how consumers distribute their expenditure on particular goods, how much they spend, and how much their savings, and what is the best way to ensure and analyze welfare and poverty level. Deaton said that households distribute their consumption among various goods in a specific time period, given their total expenditures in the period. However, their total expenditures are not given, as they are decided by the household themselves when they plan their consumption from year to year. With his co-author John Melber, Deaton used demand system to describe the relationship between quantities demanded on one hand and prices and total expenditure on the other. This system shows how the household demand for each commodity changed in response to changes in price and total expenditures. In the 1950 until 1960, Keynesians gave the theory about the relation of income, consumption, and saving. This theory also taught that aggregate consumption analysis became more realistic with the introduction of the permanent income hypothesis and the closely related life cycle models. These were able to explain the empirical findings that saving rates vary with short-run income fluctuation, but not with long-term income trends. The explanation was the consumers save part of a temporary increases in income so as to smooth consumption over time.
And Bob had reworked Friedman's permanent income theory using rational expectations ideas, which were very new and current at the time. And this is what is sometimes called the random walk theory of consumption, and it opened up an enormous subsequent torrent of research. One of the things that was very useful to me was that within that framework, in very simple cases, it was possible to derive explicit formulas which told you what the change in consumption should be when there were innovations in the stochastic process driving earnings. So if you could model the stochastic process driving earnings, you got very precise statements about what should be happening to consumption, a wonderful thing for an empiricist to have and to look at. But I was very puzzled when I was doing this because I thought I'd gone crazy and I was getting wildly inconsistent, contradictory results. And what turned out there was that if you took what at that time was the most popular and plausible stochastic process for earnings, it actually implied that the permanent income hypothesis had the opposite implications for why the permanent income hypothesis had been invented. Which was that it predicted that consumption should not be smoother than income, which it is in the data, but that consumption should be less smooth than data. So here was this basic theory taught in every textbook, and it actually had the opposite predictions to what people had thought. Of course, there are lots of ways of resolving this paradox, and one of which, once again, is to work with individual data and not work at the aggregates. Because one of the things, there are many parts of this resolution, but one of the things that is true is that the stochastic process for individuals, when you aggregate them up to the economy as a whole, completely change their stochastic properties. So in some sense, this whole thing was a false dichotomy, but it reinforced once again that we should be working at the micro level and not working at aggregates.
Deaton found that by using microeconomic data, change in consumption is more sensitive than income. This is called the Deaton's paradox. This is the case because an anticipated increase in income for the whole economy tends to be followed by additional income hikes in subsequent years. A rational representative consumer whose consumption varied along with the society's aggregate or mean income should therefore consume some of these expected income hikes before they happen, which means that current consumption should go up by more than current income. Because this contradicts the pattern in aggregate data, where consumption varies less than income, Deaton's finding put the whole theory in doubt. Deaton can prove that facing hard conditions like economic crisis, individual or household will adjust their consumption and expenditure drastically. It also on the opposite side, if individual or household recognize bigger future potential income, their consumption and expenditure can be influenced by the expected future income. This can make public consumption and expenditure more sensitive, volatile, and unpredictable compared to income volatile. This theory is related to discussion about individual saving because the flip side of total consumption is total saving. The evolution of savings over time in a country is important to its capital information and business cycles. The 1950s saw the development of two well-known theories for how consumption and thus saving depend on the development of income. The core implication of this theory is that individuals want to smooth their consumption over time. They save when they expect lower future incomes and borrow in the opposite circumstances. These theories play a major role in macroeconomic research, but Deaton found even though incomes is not increased, the consumption still can increase if the price of the goods is reachable. Deaton spearheaded the use of household survey data in developing countries, especially data on consumption to measure living standard and poverty. Deaton helped transform development economics from a largely theoretical field based on crude macro data to a field dominated by empirical research based on high-quality microdata. He showed the value of using consumption and expenditure data to analyze welfare of the poor, and identified shortcomings when comparing living standards across time and place. Data on consumption is normally collected at the household level, while poverty is naturally measured at the individual level. He gave new theory about measuring child living costs in calculating per capita estimate because children spend less than adults. He also said that growth doesn't always related to reduce poverty. If growth raises income for everyone in a proportional way, the fraction of the population below some fixed poverty line must fall, with the rate of absolute poverty reduction depending on the share of the population near the poverty line. If on the other hand, economic growth is unequally distributed, then growth may do little to reduce poverty. Deaton's research had addressed issues of great practical significance, and his contributions have influenced policymaking in developing and developed countries.